Come in, sit down, and make yourself comfortable. It is a pleasure to have you here in my study today. You know, as I sit here in the quiet of this room, surrounded by my books and the memories of a long life, I find myself reflecting on things that most people simply look past. We reached an age where we have seen the world change in ways we never thought possible, haven't we? We remember the smell of the earth after a heavy rain, and the feel of real work on our hands. But lately, a specific question has been weighing on my mind, and I felt a sudden, urgent need to share it with you. Have you ever stopped to truly look at the water flowing from your kitchen faucet? Just for a moment, think about the sheer miracle of that clear, cold stream. We live in a world that is obsessed with being sterile. We have antibacterial soaps for every surface, perfumes to mask every natural scent, and we can wash away the day with a simple turn of a handle. But let me ask you something that might sound a bit strange. How did a people obsessed with holiness and ritual purity manage to survive in a world where water was more valuable than gold, and soap, as we know it, simply did not exist? I want you to travel back with me, not just in your mind, but with your very senses. Imagine the year is 30 of the Common Era. Forget the polished marble floors of Hollywood movies. I want you to feel the reality. Imagine a heat so intense it feels like a physical weight on your shoulders. 100 degrees under a sun that doesn't know the meaning of mercy. There is no air conditioning, no shade of a skyscraper, only the vast, dry landscape of Galilee. Close your eyes for a second. Can you smell it? It's not the smell of the modern world. It is the scent of human sweat fermented by that relentless sun. It is the pungent, sharp aroma of dried dung smoke rising from cooking fires in every courtyard. It is the heavy, musk-filled air of a busy open-air market at high noon, where pack animals and people huddle together in a space with no sewage system, no drains, and no relief. Does that sound like a place where you could ever feel clean? Yet these people, our ancestors in faith, were commanded by their laws to be holy and pure before God. It is a staggering paradox, isn't it? On one hand, you have the physical reality of open sores, clouds of flies that follow every living thing like a dark shroud, and a constant crust on the skin made of sweat, dust, and rancid olive oil. On the other hand, you have a divine mandate to be unspotted. How do you bridge that gap? How do you keep your soul white when your clothes are stained with the grime of the earth and your feet are cracked like old leather? If you grew up in the countryside, or if you remember the old back roads before the pavement arrived, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Do you remember how the dust would rise in great clouds behind a passing wagon, coating everything in a fine gray powder? Now multiply that by 1,000. That dust wasn't just on the road, it was in your hair, in your throat, and in every pore of your skin. The only comfort at the end of a long, brutal day was perhaps a damp cloth pressed against your tired face. I feel it is necessary for us to talk about this today because we often forget the sheer resilience of the human spirit. We look at the past and see only the struggle, but I see a strength that we desperately need to reclaim. You see, back then, faith wasn't just something you talked about on a Sunday morning. Faith was the only shield they had against the filth that killed. Hygiene wasn't a choice. It was a biological survival protocol disguised as a commandment from the Almighty. Why is this urgent for us now, at our stage of life? Because sometimes, looking at the modern world, we feel a different kind of filth. We see a world that feels morally sterile, or perhaps we feel the weight of our own years as a kind of decay. But I am here to tell you that true dignity, the kind that matters, doesn't come from French perfumes or bubble baths. It comes from the same ancestral strength that flourished in the desert. In the moments ahead, I want to introduce you to a man named Thaddeus. He's a lot like us, an elderly peasant, a man who has walked many miles and seen much sorrow. His journey toward the temple in Jerusalem tells us everything we need to know about the struggle between the outward appearance and the inward heart. Through his eyes, we are going to see how a teacher from Galilee changed everything by doing the unthinkable, by reaching out and touching the very people the world called unclean. Are you ready to walk that dusty road with me? Are you ready to see how beauty can grow even in the midst of the most intense hardship? Let's put aside our modern comforts for a while and rediscover what it truly means to be pure. Because in the end, we are all searching for that same living water that doesn't just wash the skin, but finally quenches the deep thirst of the soul. Let us begin. Now, I want you to step out of that comfortable chair for a moment and walk with me. I want you to leave behind the cool air of your living room and the scent of the flowers in your garden. We are going on a journey, not just across the ocean, but back through the very curtains of time. I want you to feel the transition. Can you feel the air getting heavier? Can you feel the humidity of the modern world being replaced by a bone-dry, searing heat that seems to vibrate against the horizon? We have arrived in Galilee in the 1st century, and the first thing I want you to notice is that the sun here isn't a friend. It is a relentless judge. Imagine waking up in a small, crowded house made of stone and dried mud. The very first thing you do isn't reaching for a toothbrush or a bar of soap. Those things don't exist yet. Instead, you reach for a small clay jar of olive oil. Does that sound strange to you? Using oil to get clean? But remember what I told you about the climate. Without that oil, your skin would crack and bleed under the brutal sun. You rub it over your face and your arms, creating a thick, protective layer. It feels heavy and greasy, doesn't it? But it's your only shield. Now, look at the water jar in the corner. That jar has to last a family of 5 for the entire day. There are only a few liters in there. Think about that for a second. How many times a day do we turn on the tap without a second thought? For these people, every drop was a decision between life and death. If you use too much to wash your hands, your youngest child might go thirsty by sunset. This leads to what I call the spit bath of antiquity. You don't jump in a shower. You take a rough, coarse cloth and perhaps a piece of volcanic pumice stone, and you literally scrape your skin. You are scraping away the dried sweat from the night before, mixed with the soot from the cooking fire and the fine gray dust that has settled on you while you slept. It's not a refreshing experience. It's a chore of survival. Can you feel that rough stone against your arm? It's not meant to be gentle. It's meant to strip away the first layer of the world. Now let's step outside. The smell hits you first, doesn't it? It is a thick, pungent wall of aroma. There are no sewers here. In the narrow alleys between the houses, the waste of animals and humans sits in shallow trenches, baking under a 100-degree sun. You smell the sharp ammonia scent of urine and the heavy, sweet rot of organic waste. And then there is the smoke. Everyone is cooking over fires fueled by dried animal dung because wood is scarce and precious. That bitter, earthy smoke clings to your clothes, your hair, and your skin, mixing with the olive oil you applied earlier. But there is one sound that never stops. Do you hear it? It's a low, constant hum. Look closely at the person walking in front of you. They are surrounded by a living, breathing cloud. Flies. Millions of them. They are the constant companions of every man, woman, and child from the cradle to the grave. They settle on the corners of eyes. They crawl into the folds of clothing. And they swarm around every piece of food. In our world, a single fly in the kitchen is a nuisance. In their world, the flies are a dark shroud that you simply learn to live with. How would you feel, knowing that no matter how much you purified your soul, you could never truly escape the touch of these tiny, buzzing messengers of decay? Let me introduce you to a man I've been thinking a lot about. His name is Thaddeus. He's an older man, perhaps a few years younger than I am, but his body has been weathered by a lifetime of labor that we can barely imagine. Look at his feet. His sandals are nothing more than thick slabs of cowhide tied with rough leather thongs. They protect the soles of his feet from the burning stones of the road, but the tops of his feet are exposed. They are cracked, stained a deep, permanent brown by the earth, and the nails are thick and yellowed. He has a condition we would call blepharitis. His eyelids are red and swollen because of the constant irritation from the flies and the dust. Thaddeus is preparing for a journey to Jerusalem. He wants to be pure, to stand before the Almighty in the temple. But look at the road ahead of him. To get there, he has to walk through the filth of the world. He might accidentally step on the carcass of a dead bird. That would make him unclean. He might have to brush past a Roman soldier, a foreigner whose very sweat is considered a contamination by his laws. He might have to sit in the dust of a city where people don't follow the holy rules of his ancestors. Can you see the exhaustion in his eyes? It's not just physical tiredness. It's the weight of a law that demands perfection in a world that is fundamentally gritty. It's the struggle of trying to keep a white garment clean while walking through a coal mine. I ask you, have you ever felt that way in your own life? Have you ever felt that no matter how hard you try to keep your heart right, the world just keeps throwing its shadows and its dust at you? We often think of these biblical times as being simple or pastoral, but there was nothing simple about staying alive and staying holy in a land of scarcity. Every step Thaddeus takes is a battle against the invisible enemies of disease and the visible marks of poverty. His raw wool tunic is heavy and it itches against his skin, which is already inflamed by the heat. He carries a small clay flask of water, shaking it occasionally to hear the rhythmic slosh that tells him he still has a few swallows left. As we watch him walk, I want you to realize something important. This man, Thaddeus, represents the incredible resilience of the human spirit. He doesn't have antibiotics, he doesn't have treated water, and he doesn't have the luxury of a private bathroom. Yet he carries himself with a dignity that is breathtaking. He believes that despite the crust on his skin and the flies around his eyes, there is something inside him that can be made bright. Do you remember the old dirt roads of your youth? Do you remember how, after a long day of playing or working outside, you would come home and your mother would wash your face with a cool, damp cloth? Do you remember that feeling of the world being wiped away, even if just for a moment? That is the feeling Thaddeus is searching for on a grand spiritual scale. But the cloth he needs isn't made of linen. He is looking for a way to be clean that the world cannot take away. Stay with me now, because we are about to see what happens when this man of the dust encounters a teacher who claims to offer a water that never runs dry. We are going to see what happens when the unclean meets the source of all purity. It is a story that changed the world, and it is a story that, I believe, has the power to refresh our tired hearts today. Are you still with me? Let's keep walking. The road is long, but I promise you, the destination is worth every bit of the dust we encounter along the way. I want you to take a very close look at this man, Thaddeus. I don't want you to see him as a character in a dusty old book or a figure frozen in a stained glass window. I want you to see him as a brother, as a father, perhaps even as a reflection of yourself in the mirror on a particularly long day. Thaddeus is not a young man. His back has a permanent curve to it, a memory of 40 years spent stooped over the rocky soil of Galilee, coaxing grain from a land that often felt like it wanted to give nothing back. When he moves, you can hear the faint, dry click of his knees, a sound we know all too well, don't we? It is the rhythmic percussion of a life lived through honest, grueling labor. Look at his face. It is a map of every sun-drenched harvest and every winter of scarcity. But pay special attention to his eyes. They aren't the clear, bright eyes of a youth. There is a constant, irritating fire in his eyelids, a redness and a swelling that never truly goes away. We might call it a medical condition today, but for Thaddeus, it is simply the price of the dust and the flies. Those flies, can you see them? They are a dark, buzzing halo that follows him everywhere. He swiped them away 10,000 times today, yet they always return, drawn to the moisture of his eyes and the salt of his skin. Have you ever felt that kind of persistent, nagging irritation that just wears down your spirit bit by bit, until even the simplest task feels like an uphill climb? Now look down at his hands. They are thick. The skin is tough as the bark of an ancient olive tree. His fingernails are permanently stained with the dark earth, no matter how hard he scrapes at them with a piece of pumice stone. And his feet, those feet have walked hundreds of miles in sandals that are nothing more than a thin slab of leather between him and the burning stones of the road. The heels are cracked and deep, like the ravines in the desert after a long drought. Every step he takes toward Jerusalem is a feat of endurance. He is carrying the weight of his years, the weight of his family's expectations, and a much heavier weight that you cannot see, the weight of the law. You see, Thaddeus is a man of deep faith. He wants to be right with the Almighty. He wants to stand in the temple and feel just for a moment that he belongs there. But the rules are so heavy, aren't they? He lives in a world where purity is a minefield. If a dead bird falls from a tree and brushes his shoulder, he is unclean. If he walks through a Roman marketplace and his tunic touches the sleeve of a foreigner, he is contaminated. He spends his nights worrying. Did I wash my hands correctly? Did I accidentally touch something I shouldn't have? Can you imagine the constant, suffocating fear of making one wrong move and being told you aren't good enough to approach your Creator? Thaddeus is tired. He is tired of the dust, tired of the flies, and tired of the feeling that holiness is something only the rich can afford. The people who have servants to carry their water and stone jars that never absorb the grime of the world. He sits by the side of the road, clutching his small clay flask. He can hear the water sloshing inside. It is his last bit of comfort, his only protection against the heat that threatens to turn his throat into sand. And it is in this moment of exhaustion and doubt that he sees someone else on the road. A few yards away, huddled in the shadow of a rock, is a man that everyone else has walked around. A leper, a man whose skin is a horror of white patches and open, weeping sores. The law is very clear here. Thaddeus must cover his mouth, shout, "Unclean!" and run the other way. If he even breathes the same air as this man, his journey to the temple is over. He will be barred from the holy places. He will have failed his mission. Thaddeus looks at his water flask. He looks at his own cracked, aching feet. He thinks about the purity he has worked so hard to maintain. But then he remembers the words of a new teacher he heard back in Galilee, a man who spoke of a God who looks at the heart rather than the exterior. He looks at the leper's eyes and sees the same thirst, the same exhaustion, the same humanity that he feels in his own bones. What would you do in that moment? Would you choose the safety of the rule book or the risk of a human connection? Thaddeus does the unthinkable. He doesn't run. He doesn't shout. With hands that are shaking from age and fear, he opens his precious flask. He approaches the man that society has buried in silence and, with a tenderness that defies 1,000 years of tradition, he pours his last drops of water onto those unclean hands. He chooses to be dirty by the world's standards so that he can be truly clean in his soul. In that moment, Thaddeus isn't just a peasant in the dust. He is a giant of the spirit. He shows us that true dignity isn't about being unspotted by the world, but about having the courage to reach into the dust and lift someone else up. Can we find that same strength within ourselves today, even when our own bodies feel heavy and the world feels increasingly cold? Let's think about that as we continue our journey together. Now, my friends, we have reached the moment where the road narrows and the heat of the day meets the heat of the soul. This is the point of no return for our friend Thaddeus. I want you to feel the tension in the air. Can you sense it? The city of Jerusalem is almost within sight. He can see the sun reflecting off the golden ornaments of the temple in the far distance. It is a shimmering promise of rest and holiness. He has walked for days, survived the dust, fought off the flies, and guarded his ritual purity with the desperation of a man clinging to his last shred of dignity. He is so close. His heart is beating faster now, not just from the climb, but from the anticipation of finally being clean in the eyes of his God. But then, the road takes a sharp turn around a jagged limestone outcrop, and everything changes. There, huddled in a patch of gray shadow that offers no real relief from the sun, is a shape. At first, Thaddeus thinks it is just a pile of discarded rags, but then the rags move. A low, raspy groan cuts through the heavy silence of the afternoon. It is a man, but to the world Thaddeus lives in, it is not a man anymore. It is a walking corpse. It is a leper. Stop for a moment and look at this scene through Thaddeus's eyes. You see the white, flaky patches of skin that look like scales. You see the fingers that are no longer whole, and the eyes that are clouded with a deep, hopeless misery. This man is the living definition of unclean. The law, the very law Thaddeus is trying so hard to obey, is crystal clear. To touch this man, to even let your shadow fall across his path, is to become contaminated. It means the end of the pilgrimage. It means turning around and going home in shame, barred from the temple, rejected by the holy places. Have you ever stood at a crossroads like this in your own life? Have you ever had to choose between the rules you were taught and the cry of a human heart right in front of you? It is a terrifying place to be. Thaddeus stops dead in his tracks. His hand goes instinctively to his mouth to cover his face. He prepares to shout that awful word, unclean, as he has been taught since he was a boy. He wants to run. He wants to preserve his own safety, his own purity. He looks at his clay flask hanging from his belt. It's his last cup of water. His throat is a desert. His tongue is thick with the grit of the road. That water is his life. If he gives it away, he might not make it to the next well. If he stays to help, he loses everything he has worked for. But then something happens. He remembers. He remembers a voice he heard back in the green hills of Galilee. He remembers a teacher who didn't pull his skirts away when the broken people crowded around him. He remembers the words about a cup of cold water given to the thirsty. He remembers the radical idea that the outside of the cup doesn't matter nearly as much as what is overflowing from the inside. Can you feel the shift in the air? The rhythm of the story is changing now. Thaddeus isn't just a tired old man anymore. He is becoming a revolutionary. He looks at the leper, and for the first time in his life, he doesn't see a contamination. He sees a brother. He sees a man who is just as thirsty, just as tired, and just as much a child of the Almighty as he is. What is a temple made of stone, no matter how grand, compared to a temple of flesh and blood that is crumbling before your eyes? Thaddeus makes his choice. With a vigor that defies his aching joints, he steps forward. He doesn't run away. He walks right into the danger zone. His heart is pounding against his ribs like a trapped bird, but he doesn't waver. He reaches down and unclips that precious clay flask. He can hear the water sloshing inside. It is a small silver sound in a world of dry brown dust. He kneels. Think about that for a second. An elderly man with his own pains and his own heavy burdens, kneeling in the dirt to reach someone even lower. He doesn't just hand the flask over. He knows the leper's hands are too damaged to hold it. So Thaddeus takes his own rough, earth-stained hand and places it gently behind the man's neck. He feels the heat of the fever, the texture of the diseased skin. He breaks the ultimate taboo. He touches the untouchable. And then he pours. He pours the clear, cool water into the leper's parched mouth. He uses the last of his resources to wash the grime and the flies away from a face that hasn't known a kind touch in years. In that moment, the ritual purity of the temple fades into insignificance. A different kind of holiness fills the air. It is the holiness of courage. It is the purity of compassion. I ask you, as we sit here together, isn't this the kind of strength we want to be remembered for? Not for how well we followed the social scripts, but for how many times we were willing to get our hands dirty to bring a little bit of heaven to someone in hell. Thaddeus has reached his point of no return. He has sacrificed his religious standing for a human connection. He is now unclean by every law of man. But I believe in that moment, he has never been closer to the heart of God. The choice is made, the barrier is broken, and the road ahead will never be the same. Are you ready to see where this path leads him? Because once you choose love over the law, there is no going back to the way things were. As Thaddeus stood there, his empty clay flask dangling from his hand, a profound silence settled over that dusty stretch of road. The leper sat still, his eyes wide with a shock that transcended physical pain. For the first time in years, perhaps in a decade, another human being had not only looked at him, but had reached out and touched him. The water had washed away the grit from his lips, but the gesture had washed away the layers of shame that had encrusted his soul. Can you imagine the weight of that moment? Thaddeus stood there, technically unclean by every religious standard he had spent his life upholding. He had touched the untouchable. He had shared his life-sustaining water with a man the world had already buried. According to the law, Thaddeus was now barred from the temple. His long, grueling pilgrimage to the holy city was, in a legal sense, a failure. He could see the sun glinting off the temple's gold in the distance, but he knew he could no longer pass through its beautiful gates. But let me ask you something. Do you think Thaddeus felt like a failure? As he looked down at his damp hands and then into the eyes of the man he had just served, a strange, overwhelming peace began to radiate through his tired old bones. He realized that while he had lost his ritual purity, he had gained something far more precious. He had found a purity of heart that no stone bath or mikveh could ever provide. He had discovered that the spirit of the law is a living, breathing thing that thrives on compassion, not just on the strict avoidance of shadows. You see, the attitude of this one elderly man changed the course of everything in that moment. He didn't just give a man a drink, he restored a man's dignity. The leper, who had been a walking corpse, was suddenly reminded that he was a person. And Thaddeus, who had been a slave to the rules, was suddenly a free man. This is the fulfillment of a much greater purpose. We often spend our lives trying to keep the outside of our cups clean. We worry about what people think. We worry about our status. We worry about being seen as correct. But Thaddeus showed us that true holiness is found in the dirt, in the reach, and in the sacrifice. This decision had consequences that echoed far beyond that road. Thaddeus didn't make it to the temple that year, but he encountered the living temple right there in the desert. He realized that the teacher from Galilee was right. You clean the outside of the cup, but the inside is full of greed. By choosing to get his hands dirty, Thaddeus finally made his heart clean. He understood that the hygiene laws of his people were a biological survival protocol. They kept the body safe from epidemics, but they were never meant to be a cage for the spirit. He chose to break the sanitary barrier to fulfill the law of love. How does this speak to us today, in our own autumn years? We live in a world that is obsessed with being sterile and perfect. We are surrounded by artificial scents and polished surfaces, yet we often feel a deep moral filth in the air around us. We see a world that is cold and disconnected. But I want to tell you something that I have learned through much reflection. True human dignity doesn't depend on how well we mask the odors of life or how many clean circles we move in. It depends on our resilience. It depends on our willingness to be like Thaddeus, to be heirs to an ancestral strength that isn't afraid of the dust. Have you ever felt that your age is a kind of decay? Have you ever felt that the world looks at your wrinkles and your slowing pace as a loss of purity? I want you to reject that thought right now. Your age is not decay. It is a precious patina, like an ancient stone vessel that has been used for generations. The marks on your life are signs of your survival and your service. You are a repository of wisdom that this sterile world desperately needs. The moral of our story today is a solid, unshakable truth. The only water that truly cleanses is the water that overflows from a heart of compassion. Thaddeus found his soul reset button not in a stone tank in Jerusalem, but in the simple act of pouring his last drop for a stranger. He used the pharmacy of Jesus, not just the oil and wine for the wounds, but the medicine of presence and the disinfectant of mercy. As we sit here together, I want to leave you with a final thought. We are all searching for that same living water. We are all travelers on a dusty road, and we all carry our own burdens and our own contaminations. But we have the power to refresh one another. When we value essence over appearance, when we choose the person over the protocol, we are fulfilling our highest calling. Take a moment today to be grateful for the simple things, for the water that flows from your tap, yes, but also for the strength in your hands to reach out to someone else. Remember that you are robust, you are survivors of a harder time, and you carry a light that can pierce through the dust of the modern world. Let us not be afraid to get our hands a little dirty if it means bringing a little bit of heaven to this earth. In the end, we will all stand before the Almighty, and He won't be looking at the stains on our tunics. He will be looking for the reflection of His own love in our eyes. Walk with dignity, my friends. The road is long, but you are never walking it alone. Let us keep our hearts open and our spirits pure, for that is the only hygiene that truly matters for eternity. Now, I want to look you right in the eye, as if we were sharing a cup of coffee across this desk. We've traveled a long way together today, haven't we? We've walked through the searing heat of Galilee, felt the grit of the desert in our throats, and seen how a man like Thaddeus found his true dignity in the most unlikely of places. But as I sit here, looking at the books on my shelves and the shadows lengthening in my own garden, I know that our journey isn't just about the first century. It is about right here, right now. It is about the life you are living today, in this very moment. Do you ever feel like the modern world has become a bit too sterile for its own good? We live in an age of plastic and glass, of artificial scents and digital screens that never quite let us touch the reality of things. And yet, despite all this supposed cleanliness, don't you sometimes feel a different kind of dust settling on your spirit? It's a dust that doesn't come from the road, but from the quiet rooms where the phone doesn't ring as often as it used to. It's the dust of loneliness, the weight of the losses we've carried, and that nagging fear that perhaps our best days are behind us, or that we are somehow becoming obsolete in a world that moves too fast. I want to tell you something that I hope you'll carry in your heart like a precious stone. You are not obsolete. You are not a discarded clay vessel that has served its purpose and is now waiting to be broken. Do you remember what we talked about regarding the stone jars of the ancients? They didn't absorb the impurities of the world. They were solid, enduring, and precious. My friend, you are that stone vessel. Your years haven't made you unclean or worn out. They have given you a patina, a beautiful, glowing finish that only comes from surviving the elements. Every wrinkle on your face is a map of a battle won, a child raised, a grief endured, or a joy that was so deep it left a permanent mark. Why would we ever want to hide that? Think back to those country backroads of our youth. Do you remember the smell of the dust before the pavement arrived? We were tougher then, weren't we? We didn't need everything to be perfectly sanitized to feel alive. We had an immunological robustness, yes, but we also had a spiritual robustness. We knew that life was messy, and we weren't afraid to get our hands in the dirt. I am here to remind you that you still have that ancestral strength within you. It is a legacy that was forged in the desert and passed down through generations of survivors. You are an heir to a resilience that flourished even when water was scarce and the path was steep. Sometimes, in this stage of our lives, we feel like the leper on the side of the road. We feel isolated by our health, by our age, or by a society that prefers to look the other way. But remember Thaddeus. He didn't find his greatest moment of holiness by being perfect or by staying away from the mess. He found it by reaching out. He found it by realizing that he had something to give, even when he thought his flask was empty. What is the water you can offer someone today? Perhaps it's a phone call to a neighbor who is even lonelier than you are. Perhaps it's sharing a story of how you survived a hard time to encourage a grandchild who is struggling. Maybe it's just the simple, powerful act of refusing to let bitterness take root in your heart. That is the living water we've been talking about. It doesn't come from a faucet. It flows from a soul that has decided that love is more important than comfort. Do you ever worry about the legacy you're leaving behind? We often think of legacy as money or property, but let me tell you, the greatest legacy you can leave is the example of your own resilience. When the younger generation looks at you, let them see someone who isn't afraid of the dust of life. Let them see someone who knows that true purity isn't about avoiding the world, but about engaging it with a heart full of mercy. I know that there are days when the joints ache and the heart feels heavy. I feel it too. But in those moments, remember the soul reset button. Remember that you can always choose to start again. You can wash away the grime of yesterday's worries with a single act of kindness today. You have a pharmacy of Jesus right inside you, the oil of comfort, the wine of a joyful spirit, and the healing touch of presence. So, stand tall. Don't let the flies of negativity and doubt cloud your vision. You are a leader, a survivor, and a person of immense value. The world might try to tell you that you are fading, but I see a light that is only getting brighter because it is being refined by the truth. You don't need French perfumes to be pleasing to the Almighty. The scent of a life lived with courage is the sweetest incense there is. Go out into your day with your head held high. Be proud of the crust of experience on your skin. Be grateful for the water you have, and even more grateful for the chance to share it. We are all on this dusty road together, and I promise you, the destination is more beautiful than we can even imagine. You are robust, you are loved, and you are far more clean and holy than you ever dared to believe. Let's keep walking. There is still so much beauty to discover, and I am so glad to be sharing this road with you. Walk in dignity, my friend. You've earned every bit of it. As we come to the end of our time together today, I want you to do something very simple for me. Later this evening, or perhaps tomorrow morning, when you walk into your kitchen or your bathroom, and you reach for that handle to turn on the water, I want you to pause. Just for 3 seconds. Feel the cool, smooth metal under your fingers, and listen to that rush of clear, life-giving liquid hitting the sink. In that moment, I want you to think of Thaddeus. Think of the miles he walked, the dust he breathed, and the precious small clay jar he guarded with his very life. We live in an age of miracles that we have turned into mundane habits, haven't we? We forget that this simple stream of water is something our ancestors would have considered a king's ransom. After our journey today, I hope that the water from your faucet never tastes the same to you again. I hope it tastes like the victory it truly is. We've talked a lot about the crust of the earth and the filth of the road, but as I look at you now, I want to leave you with a vision of your own magnificent strength. Do you sometimes feel that the modern world is trying to wash you away? Do you feel that because your step has slowed or your hands have become a bit more weathered, you are somehow less pure or less vibrant than the world demands? My dear friend, listen to me closely. Look at the great cathedrals or the ancient stone jars we discussed. They are not beautiful because they are new or shiny. They are beautiful because they have survived the storms. You are a monument of survival. You are an heir to an ancestral robustness that didn't need soap to be holy, and didn't need modern comforts to be courageous. If those who came before us could build the very foundations of our civilization while surrounded by the dust, the heat, and the flies, what incredible things can we still accomplish with the resources we have today? Isn't it true that the most important hygiene is the one that no human eye can see? We can mask our scents with the finest French perfumes and live in houses that shine like mirrors. But if our hearts are closed and our spirits are cold, we are still wandering in a dry desert. Thaddeus found his living water not in a stone ritual bath in the temple, but in the eyes of a suffering man on a dirty road. He taught us the greatest lesson of all, that the only way to truly stay clean in a messy world is to never stop loving. It's a beautiful paradox, isn't it? That by getting our hands dirty in the service of others, we wash our souls white. I feel deeply privileged to have shared these reflections with you today. You know, this study of mine, it feels a lot less lonely when I know you are sitting there on the other side of that lens, listening with the wisdom and the perspective that only our stage of life can provide. We are like old friends, aren't we? Sitting on a porch as the sun begins to set, talking about the things that actually matter, far away from the noise and the superficiality of the world outside. If this conversation touched something deep inside you, if it gave you a bit of that spiritual refreshment we've been looking for, I would be truly honored if you would join our circle permanently. There is a small button there to subscribe to this channel, and clicking it is like pulling up a chair to this desk every single week. We have so many more roads to walk together, and your presence here makes the journey worthwhile. And tell me, do you know someone, perhaps a friend from the old neighborhood, a sibling or a neighbor who is feeling the weight of their years? Please, share this message with them. Let's spread this living water together. Why should we keep this strength and this hope to ourselves when so many people are thirsting for a word of dignity and truth? Let's build a community here where we remind each other that we are not fading, but we are being refined. The sun is setting on our story for today, but the light we've found together doesn't have to go out. Go forth into your day with the knowledge that your life is a precious patina, not a sign of decay. You are robust, you are significant, and you are walking a path that has been trodden by the faithful and the brave for thousands of years. May your thirst always be quenched by a joy that the world didn't give you and certainly can't take away. Until we meet again next week, right here in this quiet corner of the world, walk in dignity, Stay strong in your spirit, and remember that you are never, ever walking alone. God bless you, my friend. I'll be waiting for you right here.